In the system, we are told we are living on a spinning ball, and one of the proofs that we are given is high tide and low tide. And some people just say, well, there you go. There's all the proof you need. And one of those people is this fellow here, calls himself Baldy Cats. But the information that we are given, does it add up? Because if we look at the information, we see it's a lot of rubbish. That some folks they have the common sense of a hypnotized brick. They just regurgitate what they've been told in the education system without actually really thinking about it. The information you give, when you apply it, does it add up? And we're going to see that the information does not add up. So let's listen as this fellow tries to explain it.
Pushes up. But because all the waters, all the seas and the oceans, we have this interconnection between them, when they are pushed this way, it's that contributes to what we just saw with the moon's gravity and the acceleration at the beginning. It's that contributes to the pushing of the water out. So we almost have this squeezing effect where we have the water being pushed at the top and the bottom, and that's squeezing the water out in the middle. And it's that causes the high tides here.
So Baldy Cats, well, he hasn't explained it 100% to what we are told in the education system. What we're told is that the earth spins, so there's a centrifugal force that's exerted on the water, which will cause a bulge around the earth. At the same time, the moon will cause a bulge on the opposite side. So what you'll have a high tide on the one side, caused by the centrifugal force, and on the opposite side you'll have the moon, and the moon's gravity causing a bulge on the opposite side. And of course that the earth is rotating with the water underneath that. Remember, the water is also rotating with the earth, so you've got these forces acting on the water itself. And there's a problem with this. First of all, the centrifugal force should be distributed evenly. So what is causing the low tide then? And if we take the Earth's motion around the sun, right, and the Earth spin, and we see centripetal force should be 90 degrees to the orbit, the water would want to fly off. Well, they're telling us, well, gravity just keeps that water in place. So how do we disprove it? Well, in reality, what do things look like in the real world? What is it like in the real world? So here's the Earth, right? We're going to go to a set of islands around the equator with the Maldives. Remember, at the equator, the current and the tide should be the highest on the ball Earth. Yet this is what we see. These are islands in the Maldives. So just how high are the tides in these islands? Well, they're extremely low. These islands wouldn't exist. These people come here for holidays. These islands wouldn't exist if what they're saying is true. Right? We see that all these land masses have a low land mass and low tides. So let's think about it like this. If that's the curve of the Earth, right? What Baldy Cats was telling us, how high would the high tide be in that case? It would be extremely high. What is reality? High tide, the fluctuation between high tide and low tide is only a few centimeters. These islands simply wouldn't exist. And we find it the same all around the equator. So if that's the diagram that they're telling us, right, how does it apply in reality if we look around the equator? Now, if we turn our attention to areas where they experience huge fluctuations between high tide and low tide, and we look where these areas are, Canada, England, Greenland, all the way up in Greenland, France, right? Well, their fluctuations should be lower between high tide and low tide. Yet we don't find this. We find the opposite is true. Now let's take a body of water. This is the Caspian Sea, right? When we look at the Caspian Sea, the moon, high tide we're told, and low tide, right, that's caused by the gravitational pull of the moon and of course the Earth's spin, right, the centrifugal force of the Earth's spin, has no effect on this body of water. So what's going on here? How can this body of water escape these powerful forces? So when we think about it logically, so if I take a stable container, right, the water inside the container can move, and in the middle of that container can be a solid body and a glass of water on top of that. Now the water in that glass won't move, but the water on the outside in the container can move. And that's pretty much explaining what we're seeing in the oceans. If this container was moving, it would have to move in a glass of water and in a container equally. So let's listen to what he has to say, and let's just listen some more.
But I'm going to put it as simply as I can. The Earth is moving this way. The waters here and here want to move along this slant, but they can't move along that slant because the Earth is moving underneath them. And essentially, the result of all that is that there is a massive force from the water at point A and B towards the centre of the Earth. So they're trying to move downwards in a sort of like a slanted fashion, but the Earth is moving along.
Right, so the moon is a quarter the size of the Earth. How can the moon exert such a huge force on the water? A centrifugal force we can understand. So if the moon is pulling the water from the land at the top, well, it'll be low tide then. How can it be high tide? Because the water is being pulled away from the land. For it to be high tide, well, the moon would have to be 90 degrees to the tangent on that ball, so that the water is pulled up by that landmass. Goes back to front. If Baldy Katz, well, he doesn't see this somehow. He's quick to call flat earthers stupid. This simple logic escapes him. He's laughing at flat earthers. How come he doesn't see stuff like this? How come his brain and his mind don't work like this? Well, he's an hypnotized brick. The education system creates mindless parrots. That's all it does. You need to learn to reason and think and question what you're being taught. Visualize it and say, well, does it add up? And you'll see that it doesn't add up. So think about it. The Earth's oceans are being swirled around, and then the moon is pulling it backward, away from the motion of the Earth's rotation. So what would that create in the water? So imagine, think about it. The Earth is spinning, right? The oceans are spinning underneath that pull. What's going to happen? What do we know when water moves? Turbulence. Like in a washing machine, right? That's what we would see. And imagine as the Earth moves east, all the water will be pushed up against the landmass that is moving easterly. So you'll have masses of bodies of water and waves on the eastern shorelines of all the land masses. But yet this is what we see. So what we're told in the education system just simply doesn't add up. So let's listen to this fellow again, Baldy Katz, right?
Because all the waters, all the seas and the oceans, we have this interconnection between them. When they are pushed this way, it's that contributes to what we just saw with the moon's gravity and the acceleration at the beginning. It's that contributes to the pushing of the water out. So we almost have this squeeze.
So as it goes on to explain, think about what is involved in balancing a wheel. How important is it to balance a wheel? And think of the earth spinning around the sun. These masses of bodies of water, what would these masses of water cause to the earth's rotation as it orbits the sun? The earth would be wobbling all over the show. Correct? Has to be. Yet we don't see this. It tells us the earth's not spinning, not flying through space. The earth is actually motionless.
And there we go. So there are some other things that need mentioning. The role of the sun, for example.
Now think about the sun. If the sun is keeping the earth in its orbit around the sun, what kind of forces would we see from the gravitational pull of the sun? Masses of bodies of water. If the moon is causing high tides and low tides, what kind of tides would the sun be causing? Think about it. And then as the earth rotates under these and as the moon orbits the earth over a period of a month, what would happen? We don't see this. Right? So it's obvious that the moon doesn't cause the tides and the earth is not spinning. In fact, the opposite is true.
If the sun is in line with the moon and the earth, then it contributes to that effect, meaning we get larger tides. If we've got a half moon, so we've got a right angle between the moon, the sun and the earth, then there's almost like a cancelling out effect.
So some folks, as I said, they're like a hypnotized brick. They have no thinking ability. They won't reason and question things. But if you reason and question it and say, well, the stuff that you're telling us simply doesn't add up, the stuff that they're telling us in the education system, well, then they'll laugh at you and call you an idiot.
And the tides aren't as big. Time as well. You know, when we have a 6 o'clock high tide at one morning in one location, the next morning it's going to be after 6 o'clock. It's going to take longer than 24 hours. And that's because as the earth is rotating, underneath those high tides, the moon is also moving as well. And we've almost got to catch it up, and that takes a little bit longer. So that's why it's not exactly fixed to it.
Who's the real idiot? It's them. It's them for not questioning and just blindly believing what you're told.